The wine glass shattered against marble, and I froze. My hands trembled as crimson liquid spread across the pristine white floor of the Bellecourt dining room, seeping into expensive grout like blood into snow. Around me, the dinner service continued, crystal clinking, low conversations in Italian and English, the soft scrape of silverware against bone china. But I felt every eye in the room turn toward me, toward the clumsy waitress who'd just destroyed a piece of stemware that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, dropping to my knees. The broken glass cut into my palm as I scrambled to gather the pieces. My uniform, a simple black dress that had seen better days, soaking up the wine. "I'm so sorry, I'll leave it." The manager, Marco, appeared beside me, his face tight with barely contained fury. He gripped my elbow hard enough to bruise, hauling me to my feet. "Kitchen, now." My face burned as he dragged me past tables of wealthy diners who looked away with polite disinterest, returning to their $40 appetizers and $100 bottles. I'd worked at Bellecourt for 3 months, scraping together tips to cover my mother's medication and my own pathetic studio apartment in the worst part of the city. This job was everything. Losing it would mean eviction, disconnection notices, hunger. The kitchen's heat hit me like a wall. Steam rose from industrial pots, and the head chef barked orders in rapid Italian. Marco shoved me toward the staff hallway, away from the organized chaos. "You're done," he hissed. "Get your things and get out." "Please." My voice cracked. "Marco, please, I need this job. My mother, she's sick, and I can't—" "Should have thought about that before you embarrassed this establishment." He crossed his arms, unmoved. "I've got a line of people who'd kill for your position. People who don't drop things." Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back. Crying wouldn't help. Nothing would help. I'd failed again, just like I'd failed at everything else in my 23 years of disappointing existence. "At least let me finish the shift," I begged. "I'll work for free, Table 12 needs service." Another server, Gabriella, burst through the swinging doors, her face flushed. "Right now, VIP section." "Handle it," Marco snapped at her. "I can't. He asked specifically for someone new, someone who looks hungry." She made air quotes, her expression uneasy. His words. Marco's jaw tightened. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Fear, maybe, or recognition. He glanced at me, then away, calculating. "Fine," he said finally. "One last table. Then you're gone." Relief flooded through me, temporary and desperate. One more chance. Maybe if I did this perfectly, he'd reconsider. Maybe. "Table 12, Marco repeated, shoving a notepad into my hands. "Don't screw this up more than you already have." The VIP section occupied the restaurant's back corner, separated from the main dining area by frosted glass panels and strategic lighting that created shadows within shadows. My shoes, cheap flats with worn soles, made no sound on the carpet as I approached, my heart hammering against my ribs. The scent reached me first, expensive cologne, something dark and woody with notes of leather and smoke. It mixed with the aroma of aged whiskey and fresh bread, creating an intoxicating combination that made my empty stomach clench. I hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. Then I saw him. He sat alone at a table meant for 6, his back to the corner in a position that let him survey the entire restaurant. Dark hair, perfectly styled. A suit that probably cost more than my yearly salary, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes that caught the light. His hands rested on the table. Strong hands, I noticed, with a silver ring on his right index finger that gleamed dully. 2 men flanked the entrance to the VIP section, standing so still they might have been statues. Security. Their eyes tracked my approach with professional assessment, noting everything. My nervous gait, my wine-stained dress, the way I clutched the notepad like a lifeline. "Excuse me," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Can I take your order, sir?" He didn't look up immediately. Instead, he lifted his whiskey glass, swirling the amber liquid with practiced ease. The ice clinked softly, a delicate sound that somehow demanded attention. When his eyes finally met mine, my breath caught. They were gray. Not the soft gray of morning fog, but the hard gray of steel or storm clouds. They assessed me with an intensity that made me feel exposed, like he could see through my cheap dress and false composure, straight into every desperate, frightened corner of my soul. "You dropped something," he said. His voice was low, cultured, with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't place. Not quite Italian, not quite American. Something in between. Something that spoke of international boarding schools and multilingual households. Yes, I'm sorry about that. It won't happen again. Won't it? One corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile. "You're shaking." I glanced down at my hands. He was right. The notepad trembled in my grip. My fingers white-knuckled around the cheap pen. "I'm fine," I lied. "Sit." The command was soft but absolute. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, I don't—" "Sit," he repeated, gesturing to the chair across from him. "But I'll decide if you leave." Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to back away, to run. This wasn't normal. Customers didn't ask servers to sit with them, especially not customers who radiated danger the way this man did, who had armed security and eyes that could cut glass. But Marco was watching from across the room, and I needed this job. Needed it more than I needed safety or common sense or self-preservation. I sat. The chair was butter-soft leather, expensive enough that I worried my wine-stained dress would damage it. I perched on the edge, ready to bolt, my hands folded in my lap to hide their shaking. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emma." My throat felt tight. "Emma Lawson." "Emma." He tested my name like wine, rolling it around before deciding whether to swallow or spit. "You work here long?" 3 months. "And before that?" Why does it matter?" His eyes narrowed fractionally, the only indication that my question had been inappropriate. "Humor me." "Retail," I said quickly. "A bookstore. It closed down." "And before that?" "College." I didn't finish. "Why not?" "Because my father left when I was 16, leaving behind nothing but debt and broken promises. Because my mother got sick and someone had to pay the medical bills. Because life happened, and dreams died, and poverty ground you down until you couldn't remember what hope felt like. Money," I said simply. He nodded once, satisfied. Then he reached into his jacket, a movement so smooth that the security guards didn't even flinch, and withdrew a slim leather wallet. He placed it on the table between us, his fingers resting on top. "You need money," he said. It wasn't a question. I need a job. Same thing in the end. He withdrew a business card, sliding it across the white tablecloth. "My name is Dante Caruso. I own several establishments in the city. Restaurants, clubs, hotels. I'm always looking for people who understand the value of loyalty." I picked up the card with numb fingers. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering. Just his name and a phone number, no title or company name, deliberately vague. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Your manager is about to fire you." Dante leaned back, his posture relaxed despite the weight of his words. "In approximately 2 minutes, he'll approach this table and ask you to leave. You'll collect your belongings, what few you have, and walk out of here with nothing. No final paycheck, no reference, no prospects." My stomach dropped. "How do you—" "Or," he continued, ignoring my question, "you can accept my offer. Work for me. The pay is better, the hours flexible. You'd start tomorrow." "Doing what?" Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or calculation. "Whatever I need." The words hung between us, loaded with implications I didn't want to examine. Around us, the restaurant continued its elegant dance of wealth and privilege, oblivious to the negotiation happening in the shadows. "I don't even know you," I said. "No," he agreed, "but you will." Marco appeared then, right on schedule, his expression apologetic and firm in equal measure. "Miss Lawson, I'm afraid—" "She's with me." Dante didn't raise his voice, didn't even look at Marco, but the manager stopped mid-sentence as if he'd walked into an invisible wall. "Mr. Caruso, I apologize. I didn't realize—" "She's with me," Dante repeated, softer this time. More dangerous. Go. Marco went. He actually backed away, his face pale, before turning and practically fleeing toward the kitchen. I watched him go, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. What did you do? I breathed. Gave you a choice. Dante finished his whiskey in one smooth motion, then stood. He was taller than I'd expected, over 6 feet, with the kind of presence that made the air feel heavier. Take the card. Think about my offer. Call me when you've decided. And if I don't? He adjusted his cufflinks, platinum I noticed, with some kind of insignia I couldn't make out. Then you walk out of here tonight with nothing, and I forget we ever met. He paused, his gray eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. But you won't do that. How do you know? Because I can see it. He reached out and I flinched, but he only tucked a strand of my hair behind my ear, his touch gentle despite the calluses I felt on his fingertips. The hunger, the desperation. You're drowning, Emma Lawson, and I'm offering you a rope. What if it's a noose? His smile was sharp enough to cut. Then you'll hang beautifully. He walked away before I could respond, his security detail falling into step behind him like shadows. I watched him disappear through the restaurant's front entrance, watched a black car pull up, something expensive and foreign with tinted windows, watched him slide into the back seat without a backward glance. My hands were still shaking, but this time, it wasn't from fear. The business card felt like fire in my palm. I knew I should throw it away, should forget this encounter, find another job, keep struggling through life the way I always had. This man, Dante Caruso, radiated danger. The way Marco had reacted, the armed security, the deliberate vagueness of his offer. Everything screamed warning, but he was right about one thing: I was drowning. And drowning people don't question the rope. I slipped the card into my pocket and stood on legs that felt like water. Around me, Bellacourt continued its expensive performance. Wealthy patrons savoring meals that cost more than my weekly groceries. I walked through them like a ghost, invisible again now that Dante had gone. Marco intercepted me near the kitchen, his expression complicated. Miss Lawson, am I fired? He hesitated, clearly torn between his authority and his fear. Mr. Caruso is an important client. If he wants you here, then you stay. Relief should have flooded through me. Instead, I felt only numbness. I'll finish my shift, I said quietly. He nodded and walked away, leaving me alone in the hallway that smelled of garlic and fear. My reflection caught in a wine-stained window. Pale skin, dark circles under my eyes, hair escaping its practical bun. I looked exactly like what I was, a girl barely holding on, one disaster away from complete collapse. Whatever I need, Dante had said. What did a man like that need? What could someone like me possibly offer someone like him? I pulled the business card from my pocket, studying it in the dim light. Just a name and number. No answers. No promises. Only potential. Dark and dangerous and utterly terrifying. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother's nurse, another episode. Medication running low. Can you cover the refill? $300 I didn't have. $300 that would mean skipping rent, rationing food, choosing between electricity and heat. I looked at the card again. Then I saved the number in my phone and returned to work, carrying secrets in my pocket and the ghost of his touch still burning against my skin. Outside, it started to rain. I didn't call him that night, or the next morning, when I woke to another disconnection notice slid under my apartment door. The envelope was red this time, final warning before the power company cut me off completely. I added it to the growing pile on my kitchen counter, a paper monument to my failing life. My studio apartment was exactly what $300 a month could buy in this city. 400 square feet of peeling paint, a window that didn't close properly, and neighbors who screamed at each other through paper-thin walls. The radiator clanked and hissed but produced little actual heat. I'd learned to sleep in layers, wearing 2 sweatshirts and thick socks even in bed. The business card sat on my nightstand, pristine white against the water-stained wood. I stared at it while brushing my teeth with cold water. The building's hot water heater had broken again, and tried to convince myself to throw it away. Dante Caruso was dangerous. Whatever he wanted from me couldn't be legal or safe or anything resembling a good decision. But my phone kept lighting up with texts I couldn't afford to answer. Mom's nurse. She needs the medication by Friday. Landlord. Rent was due yesterday. Late fee applies. Electric company. Final notice before disconnection. Each message was another wave pulling me under. Another reminder that drowning wasn't a metaphor. It was my reality. I returned to Bellecourt that evening, my uniform freshly washed but still faintly stained from the wine incident. Marco avoided my eyes when I clocked in, assigning me tables in the main dining room, far from the VIP section. The other servers whispered when they thought I couldn't hear, speculation running wild about my encounter with Dante Caruso. I heard he's connected, Gabriella murmured during our break, smoking a cigarette in the alley behind the kitchen. Like, seriously connected. My cousin's boyfriend works at one of his clubs downtown, and he says, I don't want to know, I interrupted. She exhaled smoke, studying me with knowing eyes. He gave you his number, didn't he? I didn't answer, but my silence was confirmation enough. Be careful, Emma. She crushed her cigarette under her shoe, suddenly serious. Men like that don't make offers without expecting payment. And I don't mean money. I knew that. Of course I knew that. But knowing and caring were different things when you were standing on the edge of financial ruin. When your mother needed medication you couldn't afford. When every door you knocked on slammed in your face. The shift passed in a blur of orders and fake smiles. My feet ached by 9 o'clock, my back screaming from carrying heavy trays. A businessman left me a $5 tip on a $200 check, and I thanked him with gritted teeth. By the time I clocked out at midnight, I'd made $83. Barely enough for groceries, nowhere near enough for anything else. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, reflecting neon signs and streetlights in fractured patterns. I walked to the bus stop, pulling my thin jacket tighter against the October cold. The last bus ran at 12:30. If I missed it, I'd have to walk home. 45 minutes through neighborhoods where girls like me disappeared. Miss Lawson. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. The black car idled at the curb, engine purring like a predator. Its windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside, but I knew. Somehow, I knew. The back door opened. Get in, Dante said from the shadows within. It's late. I'm fine. The bus was just canceled. He gestured to a digital sign at the bus stop, now displaying route suspended in harsh red letters. Driver shortage. You'll be waiting until morning. I glanced at the sign, then back at the car. This felt orchestrated, too convenient. Had he arranged this? Did he have that kind of power? I can walk, I said, even though the thought terrified me. You could. He shifted, and I caught a glimpse of his face in the car's interior light. Still wearing that impeccable suit, still radiating controlled danger. Or you could accept a ride home, no obligations, just a ride. The street was empty except for us. In the distance, sirens wailed. Ambulance or police, I couldn't tell. A cold wind cut through my jacket, raising goosebumps on my arms. I got in the car. The interior smelled like leather and that same dark cologne. Dante sat across from me. The car was spacious enough for facing seats. His posture relaxed, one arm draped across the back of his seat. The driver was a solid wall of muscle in the front, silent and watchful. Another man sat in the passenger seat, hand resting near his jacket in a way that suggested weapons. Where do you live? Dante asked. I gave him my address, hating how my voice shook. He relayed it to the driver in Italian, his accent flawless and fluid. The car pulled away from the curb, smooth as silk. Through the tinted windows, the city looked different, softer, more distant, like watching life through a television screen. You didn't call, Dante observed. I've been thinking. About? About what kind of man has armed security and makes bus routes disappear. His smile was slight, appreciative. A careful one. A dangerous one. Often the same thing. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, closing the distance between us without touching. Have you reached a decision? I don't even know what you're offering. I told you. Work, good pay, flexibility. Doing what, exactly? Various things. Administrative tasks mostly. Managing schedules, handling correspondence, ensuring certain operations run smoothly. He paused, watching my reaction. Nothing illegal, if that's your concern. Is it illegal? No. I didn't believe him, but I also didn't care as much as I should have. That realization should have terrified me. Instead, I felt only tired resignation. Why me? I asked. You could hire anyone, someone qualified, someone who didn't drop wine glasses and barely graduated high school. You're hungry, he said simply. Desperate people are loyal people, Emma. They understand the value of opportunity, and they don't ask too many questions. The honesty was almost refreshing. No pretty lies, no false promises, just brutal truth delivered with clinical precision. How much? I heard myself ask. $3,000 a month to start, more later depending on performance. My breath caught. $3,000. That was more than double what I made at Bellecourt. More than I'd ever earned in my life. It was medication and rent and electricity and food. It was survival. When would I start? Tomorrow, if you agree tonight. The car turned onto my street, passing boarded-up buildings and overflowing dumpsters. A group of men huddled around a fire barrel, their faces gaunt in the flickering light. This was my neighborhood, my reality. This was drowning. Dante watched me process it all, his gray eyes missing nothing. I'll need your answer now, he said as the car pulled up to my building. Once you walk out of this car, the offer expires. That's not fair. No, he agreed, but it's honest. I don't make the same offer twice, Emma. Either you trust me now, or you don't. Trust. What a strange word coming from him. Trust implied safety, reliability, mutual respect. Nothing about this situation suggested any of those things, but $3,000 a month wasn't trust. It was survival. And I'd learned long ago that survival meant making hard choices. Okay, I whispered. Okay, what? I accept. I'll work for you. Something flickered in his expression. Satisfaction, maybe, or possession. He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope, extending it across the space between us. First week's pay. Advance. My hands trembled as I took it. The envelope was heavy, filled with cash. I didn't need to count it to know it was more money than I'd held in years. Tomorrow night, Dante continued, I'll send a car for you at 7. Wear something nice. You'll be accompanying me to a business dinner. I don't have anything nice. Then buy something. There's enough in that envelope. He gestured to the driver, and my door opened, operated from the front. Oh, and Emma? I paused, halfway out of the car. Don't mention this to anyone. Not your coworkers, not your friends. No one. Do you understand? The warning was clear, wrapped in velvet, but sharp as steel. I understand. Good girl. The word sent a shiver down my spine. Half fear, half something else I didn't want to examine. I climbed out of the car, clutching the envelope like a lifeline, and watched the black vehicle disappear into the night. My apartment building looked even more depressing after sitting in that luxurious car. Graffiti scarred the entrance, and the security door hung broken on its hinges. I climbed 3 flights of stairs, the elevator never worked, and let myself into my studio. Only after I'd locked and chained the door did I open the envelope. $750 in crisp bills. I counted it 3 times, unable to believe what I was seeing. This was a week's pay? I made less than that in a month at Bellecourt. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Save this. If you need anything before tomorrow, text me. DC. I stared at the message for a long moment, then saved the number under a single initial, D. That night, I paid my electric bill online, sent money to my mother's nurse for her medication, and bought groceries from the 24-hour market down the street. Real food, not ramen and canned soup. Fresh vegetables and chicken breast and coffee that didn't taste like dirt. I also stopped at a small boutique that stayed open late, catering to women who worked night shifts in the city's clubs and hotels. The dress I bought was simple but elegant. Black, fitted, falling just above my knees, nothing too revealing, but professional enough for a business dinner with a man like Dante Caruso. It cost $120. I'd never spent that much on a single item of clothing in my life. Back in my apartment, I hung the dress on the bathroom door and stared at it while eating real food for the first time in weeks. The fabric caught the dim light, elegant and foreign in my shabby space. What had I just agreed to? Various things, he'd said. Administrative tasks. But men like Dante Caruso didn't need administrative assistance. They needed what? I didn't know enough about his world to even guess. My phone buzzed again. Mom's nurse. Medication ordered. Thank you, sweetie. Your mother is resting easier now. Guilt and relief warred in my chest. I'd helped my mother. That was what mattered. Whatever price I had to pay for that help, I'd pay it. I fell asleep with the lights on, too afraid of the darkness and what I'd agreed to do in it. The next day crawled by in agonizing slowness. I called Bellecourt and quit, ignoring Marco's protests and questions. There was no point in keeping the job now. And besides, Dante probably wouldn't want me working somewhere else. The thought should have bothered me. That assumption of ownership, of control over my schedule and choices. But I was too numb, too focused on the practical details of my new reality. At 6:30, I showered in lukewarm water and dressed carefully, applying the small amount of makeup I owned with shaking hands. The woman in my bathroom mirror looked almost elegant, almost like she belonged in the world I was about to enter. Almost. At 6:55, my phone buzzed. Car downstairs. I grabbed my purse, a cheap bag that looked even cheaper next to my new dress, and headed down. My heart hammered so hard I felt dizzy. The same black car waited at the curb, looking obscenely expensive against the backdrop of my crumbling neighborhood. The driver, the same wall of muscle from last night, held the door open, his face professionally blank. Miss Lawson. I slid into the back seat, expecting to find Dante waiting. But the car was empty. Just me and the driver, and the armed man in the passenger seat. "Where's—" "Mr. Caruso will meet you at the restaurant," the driver said, his accent thick and Eastern European. "We take you there now." The drive lasted 20 minutes, carrying me away from my neighborhood and into the city's glittering heart. We passed high-rise apartments and exclusive shops, theaters with marquees advertising shows I'd never see, restaurants I'd never afford. Finally, the car pulled up to a building I recognized, Rossi's, one of the city's most exclusive establishments. I'd walked past it once, marveling at the well-dressed couples disappearing through its brass doors, never imagining I'd ever step inside. "Mr. Caruso waits inside," the driver said, opening my door. "Hostess knows you are coming." I climbed out on unsteady legs, my cheap heels clicking against the sidewalk. The driver pulled away immediately, leaving me alone on the street. The hostess was an elegant woman in her 40s, her hair swept into a perfect chignon. She smiled when I approached, but her eyes were assessing, calculating. "Emma Lawson?" "Yes." "Right this way, please." She led me through the restaurant, past tables of wealthy diners who barely glanced up. The air smelled of truffle oil and expensive wine, of old money and older secrets. Dante waited at a corner table, partially hidden by strategic lighting and a cascading wall of greenery. He stood when he saw me, his gray eyes traveling over my new dress with obvious approval. "Emma," he gestured to the seat across from him, "sit." And just like that, I was in his world, no longer drowning, but caught in something far more dangerous. A current I couldn't fight. A riptide pulling me under. "You look nervous," Dante observed, his fingers drumming once against the white tablecloth before falling still. I was more than nervous. I was terrified. Every instinct screamed that I didn't belong here, among these people who wore wealth like a second skin, who ordered wine without checking prices, and laughed at jokes I'd never understand. "I've never been somewhere like this," I admitted, my voice barely audible over the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. "I know." He leaned back, studying me with that unnerving intensity. "That's why you're here." Before I could ask what he meant, a waiter appeared, older, distinguished, with the kind of face that suggested he'd seen everything and judged nothing. He greeted Dante in Italian, warm and deferential, then switched to English for my benefit. "The lady will have the salmon," Dante said, not asking what I wanted. "Prepared as before, and bring us the montrachet." The waiter nodded and disappeared, leaving us alone in our corner sanctuary. Around us, the restaurant hummed with quiet conversations and the delicate clink of expensive silverware. "I can order for myself," I said, finding a small spark of defiance beneath my fear. "You could," Dante agreed, "but you'd choose the cheapest item on the menu because you're used to counting every dollar. Tonight, you don't have to do that." The accuracy of his observation stung. He was right. I'd already been scanning the menu, doing mental calculations, choosing the least expensive option, even though he was paying. "You're very observant," I said carefully. "I have to be. In my line of work, missing details gets people killed." The words hung between us, casual and chilling. I gripped my napkin under the table, twisting the expensive linen between my fingers. "What exactly is your line of work?" "Import and export, primarily. I facilitate transactions between parties who might otherwise have difficulty doing business together." His smile was slight, revealing nothing. "I'm what you might call a mediator." That's vague. Intentionally so. The wine arrived, and the sommelier poured with theatrical precision, offering Dante the first taste. He accepted it with barely a glance, his attention fixed on me. Once our glasses were filled and we were alone again, he raised his in a silent toast. "To new beginnings," he said. I lifted my glass, the crystal heavy in my hand, "and to knowing what I'm beginning. All in good time, Emma." He sipped his wine, and I noticed the way his eyes never stopped moving, constantly scanning the restaurant's entrance, the other diners, the staff. "First, I need to know I can trust you. You're the one who offered me a job. Shouldn't I be the one worried about trust?" "Perhaps." He set down his glass, and I caught sight of the ring on his finger again. Silver with an engraved emblem I couldn't make out. "But you accepted money from a stranger, got in his car, and came here tonight. That suggests either bravery or desperation. I need to know which. Does it matter?" "Very much." He leaned forward, and the soft lighting cast shadows across his face, making him look older, harder. Brave people take unnecessary risks. Desperate people are predictable. I prefer predictable. The honesty should have insulted me. Instead, I felt oddly respected, like he was treating me as an intelligent adult, rather than a naive girl he could manipulate with pretty words. "I'm desperate," I said quietly. "You already know that." "Yes, but desperation can manifest in different ways. Some people become reckless when they're drowning. They lash out, make scenes, become liabilities." His gray eyes held mine, unblinking. "I need to know you won't be a liability, Emma." "I won't." "How can you be certain?" "Because I have too much to lose." My mother's face flashed through my mind, pale and tired, connected to machines that beeped and hummed, keeping her alive one expensive day at a time. "Because the people I love depend on me not failing." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite satisfaction, but close. "Good. That's the answer I needed." Our food arrived then, presented like art on pristine white plates. The salmon was perfectly cooked, delicate and flaky, served with vegetables I couldn't name and a sauce that probably cost more than my entire weekly grocery budget used to. I ate slowly, trying to remember the table manners I'd learned from watching movies and reading books about lives I'd never live. Dante watched me between bites of his own meal, that constant assessment never wavering. "You'll be accompanying me to various events," he said, cutting into his steak with precise movements. "Dinners, meetings, social gatherings. Your role is simple. Be pleasant, be quiet, and observe." "Observe what?" "Everything. Who speaks to whom, who seems nervous, who drinks too much and says things they shouldn't." He paused, his knife hovering over his plate. "You'll report these observations to me afterward. Nothing more, nothing less. You want me to spy on people. I want you to pay attention. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes." He took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, then continued. "Spying implies deception and active manipulation. I'm simply asking you to notice what's already happening around you. Most people are blind to their surroundings, but you..." He gestured to me with his fork. "You're used to being invisible. You see things others miss because no one thinks you're watching." The assessment was uncomfortably accurate. I'd spent my entire life being overlooked, dismissed, treated as background decoration. Waitresses were invisible. Poor people were invisible. Girls like me disappeared into the scenery unless we made a mess or caused a problem. What if I see something bad? I asked. Define bad. Something illegal. Something dangerous. Then you tell me, and I handle it. His tone left no room for argument. You don't go to the police. You don't tell friends. You don't post about it on social media. You tell me, and only me. Understood? I nodded. My appetite vanishing despite the exquisite food in front of me. There's something else you need to understand, Dante continued, his voice dropping lower. By accepting this position, you're placing yourself under my protection. That means certain rules apply. Rules? You don't go anywhere without telling me first. You don't meet with anyone I haven't approved. You don't take jobs or make decisions that might compromise your safety or mine. He set down his fork, his full attention focused on me with laser precision. And you absolutely do not involve yourself with other men. The last rule made my breath catch. Excuse me? I need to know where you are and who you're with at all times. Romantic entanglements complicate things, create vulnerabilities. While you work for me, you belong to me. Exclusively. Heat flooded my face, part anger, part something more complicated. I'm not your property. No. He agreed, but you are my responsibility. And I protect what's mine, Emma. Completely. Absolutely. Without exception. The possessiveness in his voice should have sent me running. Instead, it sparked something in my chest, a dangerous warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. And if I refuse these rules? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Then we end this arrangement now. You keep the advance I gave you, call it severance, and we never speak again. He picked up his wine glass, swirling the golden liquid. But you'll be back to where you were 2 days ago. Drowning. Alone. Desperate. The threat was clear, wrapped in civility but sharp as any blade. He was giving me a choice, but we both knew it wasn't really a choice at all. I understand, I whispered. Do you? He set down his glass and reached across the table, his hand covering mine before I could pull away. His skin was warm, his grip firm but not painful. Because once you agree to this, Emma, there's no going back. You'll be in my world, surrounded by my people, protected by my rules. That protection comes with a price. What price? Your freedom. His thumb traced small circles on the back of my hand, a gesture almost tender despite his words. Your autonomy. Your ability to make decisions without consulting me first. Some would call it a cage, even if it's lined with gold. I should have pulled away. Should have stood up, walked out, returned to my miserable apartment, and my poverty and my freedom to fail on my own terms. But his hand was warm, and the restaurant was beautiful, and the salmon had been the best thing I'd eaten in months. And most importantly, my mother was safe, her medication paid for, her bills covered. What was freedom worth when you were drowning? I agree, I said. Dante's smile was slow, satisfied. Good girl. He released my hand, and I immediately felt the absence of his warmth, the loss of that strange connection. I picked up my wine glass to give my trembling hands something to do. We'll start slowly, he continued, returning to his meal as if we'd just discussed the weather, rather than my complete surrender. Tonight is simply dinner. Tomorrow I'll take you shopping. You'll need more appropriate clothing for the events we'll attend. Then Friday, there's a gallery opening. Nothing too challenging, just an opportunity for you to practice being seen but not noticed. That doesn't make sense. It will. He caught the waiter's eye, some silent communication passing between them. In my world, the most dangerous people are often the most invisible. They blend in, observe, gather information. You'll learn to do the same. Dessert arrived, a delicate chocolate creation that looked too beautiful to eat. I picked at it while Dante finished his coffee, his eyes constantly roaming the restaurant even as he maintained our conversation. There are men here watching us, I said suddenly, the realization hitting me like cold water. Dante didn't seem surprised. Yes. Are they with you? Some. Others belong to people who are curious about my dinner companion. Fear spiked through me. Is that dangerous? Not while you're with me. His voice carried absolute certainty. No one would dare approach this table, Emma. Not unless they want to start a war they can't win. The casual mention of war made my stomach clench. What kind of world had I stepped into? What kind of man inspired that level of fear and respect? As if reading my thoughts, Dante leaned back, his expression softening fractionally. You're safe with me. That's not a promise I make lightly. And it's not one I've ever broken. Whatever else happens, whatever you see or hear or learn, remember that. I protect what's mine. There it was again. That possessive claim, that sense of ownership that should have repulsed me but instead made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. Protected. Valued. Important. Why me? I asked again, unable to let the question go. There must be hundreds of desperate girls in this city. Why choose me? Dante was quiet for a long moment, studying me with those penetrating gray eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost contemplative, because when you looked at me in that restaurant, you didn't see money or power or danger. You saw a person. He paused. Most people in my life want something from me. They see an opportunity, a target, a tool to be used. But you just saw someone who might be able to help you. That kind of honesty is rare in my world, Emma. Valuable. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. We finished our dessert in companionable silence, the weight of my decision settling around my shoulders like a heavy cloak. When the bill came, Dante paid with a black credit card that had no visible numbers or name. The waiter accepted it with the same deference he'd shown all evening, returning it with a small bow. My car will take you home, Dante said as we stood. He helped me with my chair, his hand resting briefly on the small of my back, a touch that burned through the thin fabric of my dress. I'll send a driver for you tomorrow at noon. Be ready. For shopping? Among other things. His smile was enigmatic. Sleep well, Emma. You'll need your rest. The drive home felt longer than it had coming, the city lights blurring past as exhaustion and wine caught up with me. The driver remained silent, professional, depositing me at my building's entrance with a curt nod. My apartment felt smaller than ever after Rossi's elegance, more shabby and depressing, but it was mine, at least for now. I hung up my new dress carefully, then collapsed onto my bed fully clothed, too tired to even undress properly. My phone buzzed. A text from Dee. You did well tonight. Rest. Tomorrow we begin properly. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. 1,000 questions crowded my mind, but I was too exhausted to articulate any of them. Instead, I typed a simple response. Thank you for dinner. His reply came immediately, the first of many. I fell asleep with my phone in my hand, dreaming of gray eyes and golden cages, and the terrifying thrill of falling into something I couldn't escape. The black car arrived at noon exactly, idling outside my building like a sleek predator. I'd spent the morning pacing my apartment, second-guessing everything, wondering if I could still back out. But the envelope of cash on my counter, lighter now after paying bills but still more than I'd ever saved, reminded me why I couldn't. The driver was different today, younger, with sharp features and watchful eyes that assessed me through the rearview mirror as I slid into the back seat. Miss Lawson, he greeted, his accent less pronounced than the previous driver's. Mr. Caruso is waiting at Galleria Azure, 20-minute drive. I nodded, smoothing down my only decent pair of jeans, the ones without holes or stains. Next to the car's leather interior, I felt like a child playing dress-up, pretending to belong in a world that would never truly accept me. The shopping district materialized around us gradually, the city transforming from my neighborhood's decay into pristine storefronts with windows displaying clothes I'd only seen in magazines. Designer labels, exclusive boutiques, shops that required appointments just to browse. Galleria Azure occupied an entire corner building, its facade modern glass and steel. A doorman in an actual uniform stood at the entrance, opening the door with a practiced flourish as our car pulled up. Mr. Caruso is on the 3rd floor, the driver informed me, elevator straight ahead. Inside, the gallery was cathedral quiet, all marble floors and soft lighting. My cheap shoes squeaked embarrassingly as I crossed to the elevator, drawing glances from impeccably dressed salespeople who could probably smell poverty on me like perfume. The third floor opened into a private shopping suite, a sprawling space that looked more like an expensive apartment than a store. Plush chairs, floor-to-ceiling mirrors, racks of clothes arranged by color and style, and in the center of it all, Dante. He stood by the window, phone to his ear, speaking rapid Italian. He wore dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle. The casualness of the outfit somehow made him more intimidating, not less. He noticed me and ended his call mid-sentence, pocketing the phone. "Emma, good." He gestured to a woman hovering nearby, 50s, elegant, with the sharp eye of someone who'd spent decades assessing bodies and budgets. "This is Margot. She'll be helping you today." "Helping me what?" "Build a wardrobe." He moved closer, circling me slowly, and I felt like prey being evaluated by a predator. "You'll need appropriate attire for various occasions. Business dinners, gallery openings, theater events. Margot knows my preferences." Heat crept up my neck. "I can pick out my own clothes. Can you?" He stopped in front of me, one eyebrow raised. "Tell me, Emma, what would you wear to a private dinner at the mayor's residence, or a charity auction at the opera house?" I had no answer. I'd never been to either place, never even imagined attending such events. "Exactly." His voice softened fractionally. "This isn't an insult. It's education. Let Margot help you." Margot stepped forward with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "If you'll come with me, Miss Lawson, we'll start with evening wear, then move to business attire." The next 2 hours blurred into a surreal montage of fabrics and fittings. Margot pulled dresses from racks with expert precision, holding them up against me, assessing with narrowed eyes before either nodding approval or shaking her head in dismissal. "Too young," she murmured at a bright red cocktail dress. "Too cheap-looking," at something with excessive sequins. "Perfect," at a midnight blue silk number that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to be. I tried on dress after dress, emerging from the dressing room to model them for Dante, who sat in one of the plush chairs, a glass of whiskey in hand, watching with the focused attention of someone evaluating an investment. "Turn around," he'd command, and I'd spin slowly, feeling his gaze trace every line, every curve. "Good. That one stays." Some dresses he rejected immediately, too revealing, too trendy, too anything. Others received a considering tilt of his head before he nodded approval. His taste was specific, elegant but not flashy, expensive but understated, sophisticated without being provocative. "The black Armani," Margot suggested, pulling out a stunning sleeveless gown with a modest neckline and a back that dipped dangerously low. I changed into it, and when I emerged, Dante went very still. "Turn around," he said, his voice quieter than before. I did, slowly, feeling the silk slide against my skin like water. The back exposed more skin than I'd ever shown in public, the fabric stopping just above the curve of my lower back. "No," Dante said finally. Margot frowned. "But sir, it's perfect for the opera gala next month." "No," he repeated, harder this time. His jaw was tight, his hands gripping the chair's arms with visible tension. Too much exposed. Something else. I caught my reflection in the mirror. The dress was stunning, transforming me from ordinary to almost elegant. But I also saw what Dante saw. Vulnerability. An expanse of bare skin that anyone could touch, could hurt, could violate. His protectiveness shouldn't have pleased me. But it did. After the dresses came business attire, tailored pants and silk blouses, pencil skirts and cashmere sweaters. Then shoes, bags, a coat that felt like wearing a cloud. Margot worked with ruthless efficiency, building an entire wardrobe while I stood numbly, overwhelmed by the sheer excess of it all. "This is too much," I protested as Margot added a 5th pair of heels to the growing pile. "I don't need all this." "I decide what you need," Dante said, not looking up from his phone. "Margot, add the jewelry we discussed." "No." I surprised myself with the firmness in my voice. "Jewelry is too much. I'll lose it or break it or, Emma. He set down his phone, giving me his full attention. These aren't gifts. They're tools. Uniforms, if you prefer. When you accompany me to events, you represent me. That requires looking the part. I'm not your doll. No, he agreed, standing and crossing to where I stood in yet another dress, this one emerald green and perfectly tailored. You're my employee, and part of your employment is presentation. Is that really so different from Bellecourt requiring you to wear their uniform? Yes, I said stubbornly, even though I couldn't articulate why. He studied me for a long moment, then turned to Margot. Give us a moment. She disappeared with practiced discretion, leaving us alone among thousands of dollars worth of clothes. You're angry, Dante observed. I'm uncomfortable. This is... I gestured helplessly at the racks of expensive garments. It's too much. I feel like I'm being bought. You are being bought. His bluntness stole my breath. I'm paying you for your time, your discretion, your presence. That's what employment is, Emma, selling yourself in socially acceptable ways. The only difference between you and every other person with a job is that I'm honest about the transaction. That's not... I started, but he cut me off. Isn't it? You sold your time to Bellecourt for minimum wage and no benefits. You smiled at customers who treated you like furniture, worked hours that destroyed your body, all for barely enough money to survive. At least I'm paying you properly and giving you the tools to succeed. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. But if you truly want to walk away, if this violates some principle you hold dear, then leave. I'll have my driver take you home right now. No hard feelings, no consequences. His gray eyes held mine, waiting. And I knew. We both knew I wouldn't leave. Fine, I whispered, but nothing too expensive, please. His smile was slight but genuine. Everything here is expensive, Emma. You'll have to be more specific. No diamonds. Agreed. And I choose which jewelry I wear, within reason. And I searched for another boundary, something to reclaim a shred of autonomy. And you have to tell me where we're going before we get there. No more surprises. He considered this, head tilted. I can accept that, most of the time. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was something. A small assertion of will in a situation where I had precious little power. Margot returned, and we finished the shopping with a fragile peace between us. By the time we were done, she'd assembled a wardrobe worth more than I'd earned in my entire life. Everything would be delivered to my apartment that evening. Another thing I hadn't agreed to but couldn't refuse. Lunch, Dante announced as we descended in the elevator, me back in my old jeans and t-shirt, feeling even shabbier now that I'd tried on all that elegance. There's a place nearby. Good pasta. The restaurant was small, tucked down a side street I'd never noticed despite walking this area before. No sign outside, just a red door and a brass number. Inside, it was warm and fragrant, smelling of garlic and fresh bread and tomatoes simmering in sauce. The owner, an elderly man with a magnificent mustache, embraced Dante like family, speaking Italian too rapid for me to follow. He led us to a corner table, already set as if they'd been expecting us. My uncle's place, Dante explained after the old man disappeared into the kitchen. Best carbonara in the city, but he only makes it for family. I'm not family. No. His eyes held mine across the table. But you're under my protection, which is close enough. Wine appeared, and bread, and then plates of pasta that made my mouth water. We ate in comfortable silence for a while, the food too good to ruin with conversation. Tell me about your mother, Dante said eventually, twirling pasta around his fork with practiced ease. The question caught me off guard. Why? Because she's the reason you're here, the reason you accepted my offer despite your obvious reservations. He took a bite, chewed, swallowed. I like to understand people's motivations. I set down my fork, suddenly less hungry. She has early onset Alzheimer's. She's only 53, but she's fading. Some days she knows me. Other days I'm a stranger. The medication helps, but it's expensive. Insurance won't cover it because they say it's experimental. And your father? Gone. Left when I was 16. We haven't heard from him since. Dante nodded slowly, processing this. Siblings? No, just me. So you're alone, carrying everything yourself. I manage. You were drowning, he corrected gently. There's a difference between managing and drowning, Emma. You were sinking, and you were too proud to ask for help. I didn't have anyone to ask. You do now. He refilled my wine glass, the gesture oddly intimate. I take care of my people. Your mother's medication will be covered, her care facility paid for. You won't have to worry about that anymore. Tears stung my eyes before I could stop them. Why would you do that? Because you work for me now, and I protect what's mine. He said it so matter-of-factly, as if it were obvious. Your mother's struggles become my responsibility. Her well-being ensures your focus, your loyalty, your ability to perform your duties without distraction. Even his kindness was transactional. Everything with Dante circled back to control, to ownership, to the careful maintenance of assets. I should have been offended. Instead, I felt grateful. Thank you, I whispered. He acknowledged this with a slight nod, then changed the subject, asking about my life before Bellecourt, my unfinished college education, my dreams, if I'd had any before poverty crushed them. I found myself talking more than I'd intended, lulled by good food and wine and the surprising ease of his company when he chose to be charming rather than commanding. We were finishing dessert, tiramisu that tasted like heaven, when his phone buzzed. Dante glanced at the screen, and something shifted in his expression. Not quite concern, but heightened alertness. I need to handle something, he said, standing abruptly. Marco will drive you home. But I'll call you tonight. He was already moving toward the door, one hand gesturing to someone I couldn't see. Stay in your apartment. Don't go anywhere until you hear from me. Dante, what's wrong? He paused, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't read. Nothing that concerns you, yet. Then softer. Trust me, Emma, please. And he was gone, leaving me alone in his uncle's restaurant with half a glass of wine and 100 unanswered questions. Marco, the driver from this morning, appeared moments later. Ready, Miss Lawson? The drive home was tense, silent. Marco kept checking his mirrors, taking turns that seemed random, doubling back on streets we'd already passed. Security protocol, I realized, making sure we weren't followed. My apartment felt even emptier than usual when I finally locked myself inside. I tried to watch television, to read, to do anything but obsess over Dante's abrupt departure and cryptic warning. At 7, my doorbell rang. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. 3 men in delivery uniforms stood in the hallway, surrounded by boxes and garment bags. Delivery for Emma Lawson, one called through the door. My new wardrobe. I let them in, watching as they efficiently filled my tiny apartment with luxury, hanging dresses in my pathetic closet, stacking shoeboxes, arranging bags and accessories on my dresser. It took 30 minutes, and when they left, my studio looked like someone else's space. Someone elegant and polished and completely unlike me. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? It's me. Dante's voice rougher than usual. Tired. You received the delivery? Yes. Dante, what happened earlier? Business. Nothing for you to worry about. A pause, and I heard voices in the background, angry and rapid. I'm sending additional security to watch your building tonight. You won't see them, but they'll be there. Fear spiked through me. Why? Am I in danger? No, but I'm careful, and I don't take chances with things that matter to me. More voices. Someone calling his name urgently. I have to go. Sleep well, Emma. Tomorrow we begin your real education. He hung up before I could respond. I stood in my apartment full of expensive clothes I didn't choose, protected by invisible guards I didn't ask for, working for a man whose world I didn't understand. And the terrifying thing, the truly terrifying thing, was that some part of me felt safer than I had in years. Protected. Valued. Owned. I fell asleep in a vintage t-shirt surrounded by Armani and Versace. My phone clutched in my hand in case he called again. He didn't. But when I woke at 3 a.m., I looked out my window and saw a black car idling across the street. barely visible in the shadows. Watching. Waiting. Keeping me safe in a cage I was starting to forget was a cage at all. The gallery opening was everything I'd imagined high society would be. Elegant people holding champagne flutes, discussing art I didn't understand in voices polished by expensive educations. I stood beside Dante in one of my new dresses, the midnight blue silk Margot had chosen, feeling like an imposter despite the luxury draped across my skin. "Relax," Dante murmured, his hand resting possessively at the small of my back. "You look beautiful. Stop fidgeting." I stilled immediately, hyper-aware of his touch, the heat of his palm burning through silk. We'd been inseparable for 3 days now. Dinners, meetings, a private tour of his main office where I'd met his staff and seen the legitimate side of his business empire. Import-export, he'd said. Luxury goods, rare wines, exclusive partnerships. I'd also seen the other side, the men who appeared at odd hours, speaking in low voices. The phone calls he took in Italian or languages I didn't recognize, his face going hard and cold, the way people watched him with equal parts respect and fear. "Mr. Caruso." A silver-haired man approached, expensive suit and calculating eyes. "What a pleasure. I didn't expect to see you here tonight. Councilman Brooks." Dante's smile was polite, empty. "I could say the same. I didn't realize you appreciated modern art." "My wife insisted." Brooks's gaze slid to me, assessing and dismissive in the same glance. "And this is?" "Emma Lawson," Dante said, his hand tightening fractionally on my back. "My associate." Associate. Not girlfriend, not date. The word was deliberately vague, leaving everything to interpretation. "Charming." Brooks nodded once, already losing interest. "Dante, might I have a word, privately?" "Of course." Dante turned to me, his gray eyes holding a warning. "Emma, why don't you admire the sculptures? I'll find you in a moment." I nodded and moved away, feeling exposed without his presence. The gallery was crowded, full of people who belonged here in ways I never would. I drifted toward a cluster of abstract sculptures, pretending to study them while really watching Dante and Brooks in my peripheral vision. They stood close, Brooks speaking urgently, while Dante listened with that unnervingly still attention. Then Brooks handed him something, an envelope, thick and presumably full of cash or documents. Dante pocketed it smoothly, said something that made Brooks go pale, and walked away without a backward glance. I'd just witnessed a transaction. Something illegal, probably. Something I was now complicit in simply by being here. "Beautiful, aren't they?" I jumped. A woman had materialized beside me, 30s, stunning in a way that spoke of good genetics and better cosmetic work. Her dress probably cost more than my entire new wardrobe combined. "Yes," I managed. "Very interesting," she laughed, the sound like crystal breaking. "You have no idea what you're looking at, do you? Is it that obvious? Only to someone paying attention." She extended a hand, nails perfectly manicured in blood red. "Sophia Marconi, and you're Dante's new pet project." The phrase stung, but I shook her hand anyway. "Emma Lawson. I know who you are. Everyone here knows who you are." Sophia gestured subtly to the room, and I realized people were watching us, watching me, with barely concealed curiosity. "You're the girl who appeared from nowhere, the one Dante's keeping close. I work for him." "Of course you do." Her smile was sharp. "Tell me, Emma, do you have any idea what you've gotten yourself into?" Before I could answer, Dante reappeared, his hand finding my waist with proprietary ease. "Sophia. Still spreading poison, I see. Dante, darling." She air-kissed his cheeks, her perfume cloying and expensive. "I was just getting to know your companion. She's adorable. Where did you find her?" "That's not your concern." His voice was pleasant, but I felt the tension in his body, coiled and ready. "If you'll excuse us." He guided me away before Sophia could respond, his grip on my waist firm enough to bruise. We moved through the crowd, Dante nodding at acquaintances but not stopping, until we reached a quieter corner near the exit. "Are you all right?" he asked, his eyes searching my face. "Who is she?" "Nobody important. The widow of a man who used to work for my family." His jaw tightened. She has opinions about things that don't concern her. She knew about me. They all know about me. Of course they do. You're with me. That makes you interesting. He cupped my face, his thumb brushing my cheek in a gesture that felt both tender and possessive. Ignore them, Emma. Their opinions don't matter. But they did matter. I could feel the weight of their stares, their speculation. They were wondering who I was, what I meant to Dante, whether I was a mistress or a mark, or something else entirely. I want to go home, I whispered. Something flickered in his expression. Disappointment, maybe, or frustration. But he nodded. All right, wait here. I'll bring the car around. He disappeared into the crowd, leaving me alone near the exit. I pulled out my phone, checking messages to have something to do with my hands. 3 texts from my mother's nurse. She had a good day, asked about you, seemed happy. Relief and guilt warred in my chest. At least she was okay. At least my choices were helping someone. Miss Lawson. I looked up. A man stood before me, late 20s, handsome in a generic way, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. My employer would like to speak with you. Your employer? Mr. Vincent Romano. He's very interested in making your acquaintance. The man gestured toward a private viewing room off the main gallery. Just a few minutes of your time. Every instinct screamed danger. I'm waiting for someone. This won't take long. Please. His smile widened, revealing too many teeth. Mr. Romano doesn't like being refused. A threat disguised as courtesy. I glanced toward where Dante had disappeared, but he was nowhere in sight. The man took my hesitation as agreement, gripping my elbow and steering me toward the private room before I could protest. The room was smaller, more intimate, lit by soft spotlights that cast dramatic shadows. A man stood with his back to us, studying a painting that looked like nothing more than red slashes across black canvas. Mr. Romano, my escort announced. Miss Lawson. The man turned, and my breath caught. He was beautiful. There was no other word for it. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings, eyes so blue they looked artificial. But there was something wrong beneath the beauty, something cold and reptilian in his smile. Emma Lawson. He spoke my name like tasting wine, deciding whether to swallow or spit. What a pleasure. I've been curious about Dante's new acquisition. I'm not an acquisition. I work for him. Of course you do. He moved closer, and I resisted the urge to back away. Tell me, what exactly does that work entail? I'm fascinated by Dante's recent staffing decisions. Administrative tasks, scheduling, correspondence. Don't insult my intelligence. His voice remained pleasant, but his eyes went hard. Your leverage, a vulnerability. Dante's never kept someone close like this, never shown such obvious attachment. It makes me wonder what you mean to him. Fear spiked through me. Nothing. I'm nobody. Nobody doesn't get private security. Nobody doesn't receive gifts worth tens of thousands of dollars. Nobody doesn't make Dante Caruso leave business meetings early to check on them. He circled me slowly, a predator assessing prey. You're important to him, which makes you important to me. I don't know what you want. Information. Access. A way into Dante's carefully guarded world. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something sharp and aggressive. Work for me instead. I'll pay triple whatever he's giving you, provide better protection, ensure your mother receives the absolute best care. How do you know about my mother? The words came out strangled. His smile was triumphant. I know everything about you, Emma. Your failed college education, your poverty, your desperation. I know you're one disaster away from complete collapse, and I'm offering you stability, security. All you have to do is share what you learn. Small things. Details about Dante's schedule, his meetings, his plans. You want me to spy on him. I want you to be smart. Dante's protection won't last forever. Men in his position have short lifespans, tragic ends. When he falls, and he will fall, where does that leave you? Back in poverty, or worse? He leaned in, his breath hot against my ear. Choose wisely, Emma. This offer expires the moment you walk out of this room. The door slammed open. Dante stood in the entrance, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. His face was a mask of controlled fury, gray eyes blazing with an intensity that made my knees weak. Vincent. His voice was dangerously soft. Are you harassing my employee? Romano stepped back, hands raised in mock surrender. Just having a conversation. No harm meant. No harm? Dante crossed the room in 3 strides, positioning himself between me and Romano. You corner her in a private room, make threats disguised as offers, and call it conversation? I made no threats. You mentioned her mother, her circumstances. You tried to recruit her against me. Each word came out harder, sharper. That sounds like a threat to me. The tension was suffocating. Romano's escort moved toward his jacket, and immediately 2 of Dante's security appeared in the doorway, hands hovering near their own weapons. Gentlemen. Romano raised his hands higher, smile still in place. Let's not ruin such a lovely evening. I apologize if I overstepped, Miss Lawson. It was a pleasure meeting you. He nodded to Dante. We'll speak again soon. About business. Yes, Dante said coldly. We will. Romano left, his escort following, and suddenly the room felt too small and too quiet. Are you hurt? Dante's hands were on me immediately, checking my arms, my face, his touch gentle despite the violence still radiating from him. Did he touch you? No, I'm fine. What did he offer you? The question was sharp, demanding. I met his eyes and saw the fear beneath the fury. Fear that I'd betray him, that Romano's offer had been tempting, that I was already lost to him. Triple salary, I said honestly. Better protection. Care for my mother. Something in his face cracked. And what did you say? Nothing. You came before I could answer. If I hadn't come, his hands tightened on my arms, not painful, but desperate. If you'd had to choose, Emma, what would you have said? I should have been angry at the possessiveness, the assumption of loyalty he hadn't truly earned. Instead, I reached up and touched his face, feeling the tension in his jaw, the barely leashed violence trembling beneath his control. I would have said no, I whispered. Because I made you a promise, because you've kept me safe, because... I stopped, unable to finish. Because what? Because you see me, I admitted. Everyone else in my life has looked through me, past me, treated me like furniture or burden. But you see me, Dante, even when I wish you wouldn't. His kiss was sudden and consuming, all pretense of professional distance evaporating. He pulled me against him, one hand tangling in my hair while the other gripped my waist, holding me like I might disappear. I melted into him, into the heat and danger and desperate need radiating from every inch of his body. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard. You're mine, he said roughly. Not my employee, not my associate. Mine, Emma. Say it. I should have refused, should have maintained boundaries, kept professional distance, protected what little independence I had left. But standing in that private room, having just been threatened and then claimed, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding for days. I was already his, had been since the moment I sat at his table, since I accepted his card, since I chose his cage over freedom. Yours, I whispered. His smile was fierce, possessive, utterly triumphant. Good girl. 3 months later, I stood in Dante's penthouse apartment, our apartment now, though I still kept my old studio out of stubborn principle, watching the city lights sparkle below. My mother was in the best care facility in the state, her medication covered indefinitely, her lucid moments growing more frequent with proper treatment. I wore clothes I'd chosen myself, had learned to navigate Dante's world with increasing confidence, had become someone I barely recognized in the mirror, and I'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love with a man who dealt in shadows and violence and brutal honesty. What are you thinking? Dante appeared behind me, arms circling my waist, chin resting on my shoulder. About cages, I said. And how sometimes they're the safest place to be. He turned me in his arms, gray eyes searching mine. Do you regret it? Any of it? I thought about that girl in Bellecourt 3 months ago, desperate, drowning, invisible. I thought about the choices I'd made, the lines I'd crossed, the person I'd become under Dante's protection and possession. No, I said honestly. I don't regret it. Good. He kissed my forehead, gentle despite his nature. Because I'm never letting you go, Emma. You understand that, don't you? You're mine, completely, forever. The words should have terrified me. Instead, they felt like coming home. I know, I whispered against his chest. I know. Outside, the city hummed with life. People struggling and surviving, drowning and floating, making impossible choices in desperate circumstances. Once, I'd been one of them. Now, I was something else entirely. Protected, possessed, loved in the only way a man like Dante could love, absolutely, obsessively, with a devotion that bordered on madness. And maybe I was mad too, for accepting it, for craving it, for finding safety in a cage lined with gold and guarded by violence. But as Dante held me against him, his heartbeat steadied beneath my ear, I realized something profound. Freedom meant nothing when you were drowning. Sometimes survival required surrender. Sometimes the cage was exactly where you needed to be. Vincent Romano had been dealt with. I didn't ask how, didn't want to know the details. The threats had stopped. The watching eyes had vanished. Dante's world had closed around me like armor, protecting me from everything except him. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. I love you, I said, the words surprising us both. Dante went very still, then pulled back to look at me, his expression unreadable. Emma, I know you didn't ask for it. I know it complicates things, but it's true. I met his eyes steadily. I love you, Dante Caruso, all of you. The darkness and danger and brutal honesty. The way you protect me even from myself. The cage you've built that somehow feels like freedom. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his hand cupped my face with devastating gentleness. I've loved you since that first night, he admitted roughly. Since you sat across from me shaking and afraid but refusing to break. Since you chose poverty over compromise. Dignity over desperation. I've loved you from the beginning, Emma. I just didn't have the words. He kissed me then. Soft and slow and sweet. So different from that first consuming kiss in the gallery. This wasn't possession or claim or desperate need. This was promise. This was forever. When we finally broke apart, both of us smiled. Real smiles, not the careful masks we showed the world. What now? I asked. Now? He pulled me back against him, both of us looking out at the city that had nearly destroyed me and had ultimately led me to him. Now we live. We build something real from all this darkness. We protect each other, challenge each other, love each other despite everything and everyone who says we shouldn't. Sounds dangerous. Everything worth having is dangerous. His arms tightened around me. But I promise you this, Emma Lawson. Whatever comes, whatever wars or threats or challenges we face, you'll never drown again. Not while I'm breathing. Not while I have the power to protect you. And standing there in our penthouse sanctuary, wrapped in the arms of a dangerous man who loved me with terrifying intensity, I believed him. I'd walked into his world with nothing but desperation and borrowed time. Now I stood beside him as an equal, a partner, a woman who'd learned that sometimes salvation came wrapped in shadows, that protection could feel like possession, and that love, real love, meant choosing someone every single day, even when the choice was terrifying, especially when the choice was terrifying. Outside, it started to rain. Soft drops against the windows, washing the city clean, and inside our golden cage, wrapped in each other's arms, we were finally, completely home. Two broken people who'd found each other in the darkness and built something beautiful from the wreckage. Two souls who'd learned that drowning was only fatal if you faced it alone. Two hearts beating in perfect dangerous synchrony, protected by shadows and sealed with promises that would outlast any storm. Can I sit here? I'd asked that first night. Sit. But I'll decide if you leave, he'd answered. And in the end, I'd never left at all. I'd simply stopped wanting to.